The world told him to be cruel. He told them the truth. He built an empire on 4 words, "I don't like it," turned brutal honesty into a billion-dollar formula, and convinced a generation that being told you weren't good enough was the kindest thing a stranger could do for you. And then one summer afternoon in Malibu, the man who had spent 20 years deciding who got to live their dream was lying face down on his own driveway, unable to feel his legs. Have you ever built your entire identity around being the one who tells everyone else the truth, only to discover, when the moment finally came, that you had no idea how to tell it to yourself? Because that question is at the center of everything that happened to Simon Cowell, the man the tabloids called the most hated man on television, the man who quietly became one of the most powerful figures in the history of pop music, the man who, by his own admission in 2026, is still not entirely sure who he is when the cameras switch off. August 8th, 2020. Malibu. A new electric bike just unboxed in the courtyard of his California home, his son Eric, 6 years old at the time, watching from the driveway. Simon climbed on. He twisted the throttle harder than he meant to. The bike reared up like a horse. And in the space of a single second, less time than it takes to read this sentence, Simon Cowell went over the handlebars and landed on concrete with a force that shattered his spine in multiple places. His son saw it happen. The surgeon who later operated on him told reporters Cowell was millimeters from being permanently paralyzed from the waist down. But this story does not begin there. It begins in a small leafy village in Hertfordshire, England, in a house that smelled of cigarettes and ambition and old show business gossip. Simon Philip Cowell was born on October 7, 1959, in Lambeth, London, and raised in Elstree, a quiet, comfortable village known mostly for the film studios that loomed over it like a promise. His father, Eric, was a property developer who also worked as an executive at EMI Music. His mother, Julie, was a former ballet dancer and socialite who, by every account from people who knew her, was the most charismatic person in any room she walked into. Simon adored her, worshipped her, really. Friends would later say his entire understanding of what it meant to be liked, to be wanted, to be the center of attention, came from watching Julie Cowell hold court at dinner parties. But there was a wound underneath the comfort. Simon was a difficult child, hyperactive, restless, expelled from one school, bored at another. He has said, in his own words, that he felt like an outsider, even in my own family. He left school at 16 with no qualifications, no plan. Just a vague, gnawing certainty that he was going to be somebody and absolutely no evidence to support it. His father got him a job in the mailroom at EMI, pushing trolleys, sorting envelopes, a teenage school dropout in a building full of hitmakers. And it was there, between the lifts and the loading bays, that Simon Cowell discovered the one thing he was extraordinary at. He could hear, before anyone else in the room, whether a song was going to sell, not whether it was good, not whether it was art, whether it was going to sell. For most of the 1980s, that gift made him almost, but not quite, rich. He founded a label called Fanfare Records with a partner named Ian Burton. He signed a singer called Sanita. He scored a hit with So Macho. He bought a Porsche. He moved into a flat in central London. He thought he had made it. And then, in 1989, Fanfare collapsed. The company that owned half of it went under. Cowell's Porsche was repossessed as compensation. He was 30 years old, broke, in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds, and forced to move back home to live with his parents in the bedroom he had slept in as a teenager. Would you have the stomach to start again? At 30, with nothing, in the same bed you slept in as a child, knowing the only thing you were good at had just failed you publicly? He did not talk about it for years. He told one journalist later, quietly, that those months at his parents' house were the most important thing that ever happened to me. Because they taught him something most people in the music industry never learn. He learned what failure actually felt like. The weight of it. The taste of it. And he made himself a promise that he would never feel that weight again. He clawed his way back. A job at BMG. A string of novelty hits, Robson and Jerome, the Power Rangers single, the Teletubbies record. The industry sneered. Cowell didn't care. Every novelty hit was another zero in his bank account, another step further from that bedroom in Elstree. And then, in 2001, came the moment that changed everything. A producer named Simon Fuller approached him with a new format, a talent show, real auditions, real rejections, real judges, not the polite, encouraging kind British television was used to. The honest kind. The kind that would say, on camera, what every executive said in private. Cowell signed on. The show was called Pop Idol. It debuted on @V in October 2001. By the finale, more than 13 million people in the UK were watching, and every single one of them was watching for the same reason. Him. By 2002, the format had crossed the Atlantic. American Idol launched on Fox in June. Within 2 seasons, it was the most watched program on American television, a position it would hold for an unbroken 8 years. By 2009, Cowell was reportedly earning around $36 million a year from American Idol alone. He launched The X Factor in the UK in 2004, Britain's Got Talent in 2007, America's Got Talent, The X Factor USA. He signed Leona Lewis. He signed Susan Boyle, whose first album sold over 9 million copies worldwide. In 2010, on a UK X Factor stage, he assembled 5 teenage boys who had auditioned separately into a group he named One Direction, a band that would go on to sell over 70 million records and gross more than $1 billion in touring revenue. But what the audience was watching and what was actually happening were 2 entirely different stories. There is a version of Simon Cowell's story that the world was allowed to see during those years. The smirk, the black t-shirt, the high-waisted trousers, the catchphrases, the yacht, the string of beautiful girlfriends, the Bentley, the seemingly inexhaustible supply of confidence. But the version unfolding behind every camera, before every microphone, beneath every headline about the man who had made cruelty into entertainment, that version was something quieter, more fragile, and far more defining. He was not sleeping. He has said, on record, that for most of the 2000s he was working through the night, surviving on cigarettes and lukewarm tea, and 3 or 4 hours of sleep, sometimes less. He was lonely in a way that money could not fix. He had not married. He had no children. His closest relationships were with ex-girlfriends he refused to let go of, a tangle of loyalty and avoidance that he himself could not fully explain. And underneath all of it was a fear so specific and so private that he almost never spoke of it. The fear of disappointing his mother. And no one in the audience knew. In 2014, 2 things happened in quick succession that began to crack the public version of Simon Cowell open. In February, his son Eric was born to Lauren Silverman, a relationship that had begun under tabloid scrutiny and family scandal. Cowell, who had publicly said for decades that he did not want children, held his newborn son and, by his own account, wept. He has said, in interviews since, that the moment he became a father was the moment he understood he had been performing a version of himself for 30 years. And he wasn't sure he liked the person he had been performing. Then, in July 2015, his mother Julie died at the age of 89. He has called it the worst moment of his life. He returned to the X Factor weeks later because he did not know what else to do, and broke down in his dressing room before going on. "I lost everyone," he told the journalist Stephen Bartlett years later. "And then Eric saved me." It would not last. By 2019, Cowell looked, on the surface, like a man who had finally found the off switch. He had quit smoking. He had cut sugar, dairy, wheat and red meat from his diet. He had lost over 20 pounds. He had bought a new home in California. He had a son who adored him. He was, he said, the happiest he had ever been. Or so it seemed. But the next chapter was not forming on a television set. It was forming on a driveway in Malibu, in the form of a bicycle he had owned for less than a day. The fall on August 8, 2020, was catastrophic. He broke his back in multiple places. The surgery lasted 6 hours. A metal rod was inserted into his spine. The surgeon told him, plainly, that he had come millimeters from being paralyzed for life. For weeks, he could not stand without help. For months, he could not pick up his son. And then, 18 months later, in January 2022, he crashed again. A second e-bike accident, this time in London. A broken arm, a concussion. He was not wearing a helmet. Pictures of him, gaunt and bandaged, ran in every tabloid in Britain. Have you ever spent your entire life telling other people they had no excuses, only to be forced, by your own body, to admit that you did? Because that was the question Simon Cowell could no longer outrun. The man who had built an empire on judging other people's mistakes was lying in a hospital bed, having made the same one twice. The man who had told contestants for 20 years that they needed to listen had not listened to anyone. Not his fiancée, who had begged him to wear a helmet. Not his doctors, who had told him after the first crash that a second fall could end him. Not himself. He told Bartlett on camera that on the way to the hospital in 2020, he had genuinely believed he was about to die. I'm thinking, this could be it. But I was in so much pain, I was just thinking, please, get me out of this pain. The man who had an answer for everything had no answer for this. What he did next surprised even the people closest to him. He didn't return to the lights. He didn't book a comeback tour. He didn't write a memoir. He pulled back. He canceled appearances. He shut down Psycho, the record label he had built from nothing, in 2021. He moved his family to a quieter house. He started going to bed before midnight for the first time in 3 decades. He proposed to Lauren Silverman on a beach in Barbados over Christmas 2021. He stopped, almost entirely, doing the thing he had built his life around, being seen. He has lost things permanently, the reflexes he had at 50. The arrogance, his friends say, that used to fill a room before he did. The certainty that he was the smartest person at the table. The belief, which he held without question for 40 years, that nothing could touch him. And he has gained one thing he never had before: the ability to be quiet. In 2026, Simon Cowell is 66 years old. He still judges Britain's Got Talent and America's Got Talent, but on his terms now, with fewer days on set and longer stretches at home. He lives mostly in London with Lauren and Eric, who is now 11. He has said, more than once, that he plans to leave his son no inheritance, that Eric will have to make his own way, the way Simon did at 16, pushing trolleys at Emmy. He recently apologized in an interview with the New York Times for some of the cruelest things he said to American Idol contestants in the early years. "I wasn't trying to be a dick on purpose," he said, quietly. "I'm not proud of some of it. He drives Eric to school most mornings. He puts him to bed most nights. He has said the smartest decision he ever made was waiting until he was 54 to become a father, and the dumbest was thinking, before that he didn't need to be one." There is something almost unbearably human about that image. The man who built a global empire teaching strangers how to perform for an audience, sitting at the edge of an 11-year-old's bed at the end of the day, learning how to be a person nobody is watching. Simon Cowell's story is not a redemption arc. It is not a comeback. It is something more uncomfortable than either of those. It is a mirror held up to anyone who has ever built an identity around being the harshest, sharpest, most truthful person in the room, and discovered, too late, that the person they were hardest on was themselves. Because the truth that took him 60 years to learn is the same truth he spent 30 years refusing to say out loud. That being right is not the same as being whole. That telling other people the truth is the easiest form of honesty there is. The hardest one is the one he is still learning. Have you ever wondered what you would have to lose before you finally became quiet enough to hear yourself? If something in this story landed somewhere in your own life, if any part of it felt familiar, leave a like, subscribe, so you don't miss the next story like this one. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing from Simon Cowell's life that you will carry with you? Because the greatest lesson he may end up teaching is not the one he spent 20 years shouting from a judge's chair. It may be the one he is whispering now, at the edge of a child's bed, in a house where no one is filming.